worries. So let me kick this off real quick. Just let everyone know who you are and what's going on, and then I can't wait to dig into this.
Thanks, man.
So, hey, one and all, my name is the Librarian. This is From the X presenting DC DMB Spotlight, where we call out members of the community to come in and chat and talk about their, DC experience, telling those stories. So I have the great pleasure of introducing 7DaysIn, and I swear there are elephants upstairs, but
it's a pretty busy hotel today.
It is a pretty busy hotel for sure.
Yeah, they're really getting into it.
Now, you're involved with 3D Productions, Cadence, and then Harbinger Industries?
Yeah, Harbinger Industries has always been my own design moniker. That's what I've used all the time for graphics and stuff that I've done all over the years, ever since I started when I was 18. For me, it was just more, I chose Harbinger Industries because a harbinger is a bringer of things to come.
Okay.
So the concept built around that was like, I need a really cool name that's about pushing future forward things of any kind, and I felt like that kind of worked. And Industries was obviously like, I was very inspired by airline industries, very inspired by any other company that was a mid-level 2000s design outfit around that time, or earlier actually, around the 2000s. There was a bunch of them that were going hyper like very sci-fi in their designs, very minimalistic, but very like tiny fonts and crazy, parallax graphics and fractals and all kinds of weird stuff growing everywhere, and layering of all kinds because Flash was still cool. That's where I came up from. Like, I got into a lot of this very excited, like around I remember it was the tail end of high school for me.
Okay.
Like, the tail end of high school was finally getting into the Crystal Method and finally getting into like a couple of artists that I just not really listened to that much before. But my friend, of course, it comes through a friend who just starts listening. My friend Joe Tran, he was a guy who I inline skated with and like hung out with in certain classes. And over the years, we had just gone through different cliques, but he was very influential in kind of helping me getting into electronic music, and I was just listening to part of what he was listening to, which was a little bit of it was the Crystal Method. It was the famous album that they released, I think in '97.
I can see the cover.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the top of what it was called. Trip Like I Do. Well, it was Trip Like I Do. I think it was the one with that one. But that was the song where my first exposure to being like, wow, okay, this is vastly different, and this is very cool, and it's so rhythmic. And I grew up growing up from India. Like, I grew up from that background where it was all tablas all the time. It was drums and rhythms and everything, and polyrhythms and all kinds of complex variations of sound that you could listen to and also from voice, and also seeing that eventually when I got around to listening to the Prodigy and some of their earlier work, there were so many samples, just Middle Eastern samples coming through in a lot of their music. And I loved it because I remember hearing the breakdown to Smack My Bitch Up, and it was one of those things where it just blew me away. I was just hearing that, and then all of a sudden that crazy breakdown, and it just was like, I should stay around this place and see what this kind of music is doing around that time. So that was from high school. High school, went to college at Georgia Tech and in Atlanta, and that's the first time when I started going to parties, because I didn't know other people who were in the scene, who were even into it at all. And bless my old friend Erica Para. I know she's doing great things wherever she is, but she was like my fairy godmother that got me into it all.
That's
like,
awesome.
Really kind of led me into it. Like, she was totally candid out, like dressed out in such a way where I was like, what wild walk are you coming from? And it was super fun to just find out exactly what she was into. That led me to meeting the Liquefied Groove crew down there, and also going to like the Masquerade and various large venues in Atlanta, and starting out and just seeing what warehouse raving was like. Awesome. And just getting my first exposure to it in ways that was really cool. I had very cool mentors that walked me through a lot of the like do's and don'ts of like how you should party and how you should be careful about stuff. I had packs and packs and packs of glow sticks nonstop, and I was very, very addicted to playing with lights and hands and doing everything possible. Every bit of liquid that I could do at any time was always my choice and my jam, because it was a very cool way to express yourself, and it was different. And yeah, it was corny, but at the same level, I think Candy Ravers and Candy Raving around that time was kind of in its own fun nascency, and it was still fun. everyone was still enjoying a lot of it, and it was just like, yeah, whatever. If you want to, look, I look like a Lisa Frank catalog. What do you want me to tell you? This doesn't make any sense from the get-go, but this is my counterculture, and I'm going to live it and love it and enjoy it. And it was very, very fun. And that was a truly, truly amazing time. Being able to go to early raves, being able to check out early versions of around that time, it was Phantom 45, it was Sniper coming out of Toronto. Man of Steel was really, really massive around that time. And I remember that was also when I first listened to Aphrodite. And he was probably one of the earliest forays into drum and bass and jungle that I was just like, holy crap, this is a totally, totally new level of sound and excitement. I mean, it fit mentally. It fit my mental rhythm in a way that I didn't even know that I needed. And it was very, very, very profound to feel that feeling so early on. And that was at 18 years old, that was really cool. I really, really should not have probably found raving at the same time in college because I was at a good school that I actually, really would have benefited from, going to, finishing through. I was at Georgia Tech studying engineering. And I did fine anyways. I mean, I'm still a developer. I still, do well on my own. But it's one of those things where I partied way too hard. And I really, really went overboard, and I really kind of had my own time, and I'd not known excess before that. When you live a sheltered life as a kid before just being told to just do well in school all the time, and you finally let go, and then you finally find new ways and new friends who encourage you to let go, and then you just want to push the limit, just see where the sky goes. And the sky went a little bit more to a more financially responsible spot. I just still went back to Virginia and, still went and kept doing classes, but I still stayed up with the scene around that time. This was around 98, or actually, no, this was 99, 2000-ish, around that time. I was 18, I was 19 or 20. Pretty young, pretty stupid either way, and my parents were disappointed in me. There was plenty of that. There was a lot of challenges because when you grow up from India to America, you've got to live up to that standard of you're going to succeed and that's all you're going to do, and there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And that's a natural narrative I think you can hear time honored again and again. That's been said quite a bit. It's one of those things where I think in its own way it broke me a little bit, and I didn't want to really go that entire route because I'm like, if this is all there is, and this sucks. And it wasn't me until realizing later on, it's like, hey, we're breaking you right now so that you can be prepared for whatever happens later on. You're not going to like us, but you're not going to have to like us because we're your parents. We're not your friends. And I figured out, that was some very good wisdom to understand later on. I still am very lucky that I was birthed from very wise individuals who really gave me the right pieces one way or another to kind of keep my wherewithal, and still stay true to loving a lot of what was being presented in the scene and how it was evolving. I was lucky to find buzz. I was lucky to find tracks in the Edge and a bunch of venues early on. I got a chance to just go to really cool spots that I remember later on people would talk about very reverently. And it was fun to be a part of that time when it was still young, and a lot of us were just kids and doing that. And those were just times when I was just experiencing it just for the first time on my own. It was cool to just get into it. I had a couple of friends who were close by that I knew from Mason, when I transferred back from Atlanta, mid 2000s or so. I was very, very much not ready to jump right in. I was very much I don't know what to do. I really shouldn't be doing this. I really should be heads down. But at the same level, it was kind of you just put a worm into someone's head and you can't RFK your way out of it that easily. You're just going to keep following it no matter what. And the music was just too good. It was also just too much where if I felt like I didn't stay connected to the scene, to them, to this music that I always wanted to hear and just find it. At that point, there was still enough exclusivity to enjoying drum and bass where you were in a niche of a niche of a niche, and it was very cool. It felt very avant-garde. It felt very I felt very smart and just fun, like slick for just being into something that no one else really knew. And yeah, I like that. I think a lot of us really relish that kind of exclusivity. Whether you were a part of dubplate culture or not, at whatever time you got into higher levels of, being into, music or whatever genre you cared about. If you started producing, you got to enjoy even higher levels of it. I mean, it was exciting. I always really was starstruck with a lot of cool stuff back then, going to parties, wondering how the entire thing worked, how people interacted. I always loved people watching. There was so many different aspects to the entire culture that was an entire eye-opener. It was a second really, really advanced high school period for me in life. Like I had a fun time going through high school, but I was definitely in my own cliques, and I tried to break free of a lot of that later on, like as junior, senior year came on. I was just like, hey, this is just a system of belief, and there's some really stupid movies by, John Hughes that we all seem to watch too much that seem to reinforce it in a very weird way, and it keeps it going on for too long. I get feeling disaffected, but I didn't understand for too long that all that frustration just needed just like a focus on something, because, now I know that I'm the sum of like, my time and attention. And thank God I stuck to just still learning some smart stuff and just, keep myself not that unoccupied on things. But where were we? My God, we're still back at me going to like parties and events back when I was in my early 20s, just trying to find a place to and a space to find a connection with people and what I wanted to do. I really, really loved going out. I really loved enjoying the music. I loved being garrulous and really outgoing. And I remember a time when I was so like friendly and innocent and so naive about everything to everyone. I think all of us had that point where we go through a honeymoon phase of appreciating like a new level of acceptance or just a new level of excitement about being part of something different. And that was definitely, my time. I think all of us have like, the first few years is really good. And then eventually you go into, a group of friends, and then you realize friends have the same dynamics as what you've seen in other, closer situations. It's just human. So in the end, having that tempered and having that understanding, always came, with time. But that's the fun of like how you grow through everything, anyways. But I just remember at one point while going to Mason, I knew a couple of friends. My friend John Seddon, he's now over in the West Coast, working for Apple, I think. He's a good guy. But he was always the guy who was like driving fast cars and really, really cool. And he was still into techno around that time. And through that, we had met other friends in Fairfax, Virginia, hung out at their house parties. I got to go, on weekends and just find a regular thing. And then one time in July back of '98, I remember going to a party where I think it was called Euphoria. And all of us, like everyone that I'd ever seen at the entire scene at that time. It was very fun because there was still that time when young scenesters and everything had, and there were all, levels of like, weekend underground parties and events that would happen aside from the main events. Because once you met people, of course you would have different parties and things that were going on. But it was just fun to be part of that out of the blue and to see John Tabb and fucking, Scott Henry and a couple other people literally show up at the same place and being like, what is happening? What is going on? They're like, yeah, we heard this party was pretty popping. We just wanted to come in, check it out. John Tabb was actually scheduled to play a set, so just got to hear him at a house party that, I was helping throw, and it was just super fun. And it was just wild to meet all these cool people. And from there, I think everyone has like their point where if you just meet the right group, you're off to the races and you pretty much have a clique to hang out with and all kinds of fun stuff to do, for whatever you're trying to get into. But I just remember after that one event, it was like a very game-changing moment, like getting to meet a lot of people and then suddenly being in a certain in-group all of a sudden where people just looked at you different. They just treated you different. You got to hang out backstage. I got to go to the backstage of Buzz. I got eventually to meet up with DJs and artists and people that I really wanted to talk to and everything. And it was super special. It was just it was a honeymoon phase and then some, because when you're that young and you're aspiring to, be a part of that, and then all of a sudden you're just hanging out with them, and there's no real reason that you really provide anything to the situation beyond just being like, hey, clout for you, I guess, whatever that means. You must think I'm pretty special, but it was just funny because those points I was just really super enamored with the entire aspect of probably more of the on its face glamour of the scene, like really, really cute girls at parties, really good times hanging out with everybody, staying out late, just having fun, and just eventually getting enough time to like listen to songs, recognizing patterns in that, understanding how DJs were mixing and how they were trying to do stuff. And I just don't know when that transition kicked over, but I'm glad it did. I think it eventually had to do with going to a house party and of course seeing the gear up front and just having some time alone with it and just kind of playing around with it. If someone had records on cue, it was just a chance to be like, well, I mean, it's there. If you're curious, let's demystify this entire thing. Mm-hmm. I think just around like 2000s, like as that party in July of like 98, after that happened, and meeting with friends and continuing on in circles, and there, eventually I just met up with enough people with enough equipment, and I moved into a house together. And, I was able to go ahead and practice and, have fun just sessioning and buying records slowly around that time too. Like I had bought records in Atlanta. I'd first bought records at Satellite Records. That was like the official first store that I'd gone to.
Awesome.
And it was definitely cool to see it. It was just exciting because it was just like, wow, I just listened to Andy C. and I'm looking at Ram Trilogy Molten Beats right in front of me, and that was probably like one of the earliest, coolest, wildest, most insanest albums I remember picking up back in the day. I also remember picking up The World of Drum and Bass, like it was one of the first edition releases, like a big giant book, that big thick one with John B's version of the salsa and like the salsa remix or something else like that. I just remember laughing out loud listening to that tune and being like, holy crap, this is the most ridiculous genre of music I've ever heard in my life. It was just one of those moments where I think it was exciting to see the level of creativity on display from the artists just coming out of the UK at the time that I was just really starting to grasp onto. And of course, I started leaning a lot more towards like on the darker side, Ed Rush, Optical, Conflict around that time. I guess I would also say, who else? Kamal. I mean, well, no, they're Kamal and Rob Data is who they are nowadays. But I just remember going towards really darker music and just noticing that side was truly, truly scary to me at first. There were points when I just remember hearing John Tab play. I think it was a Stack and Skynet. It was the Under Fire LP. And this was, back then, God, I just remember him playing, I can't remember what the track's names was. And it's sad because I used to always be a real heavy, annoying train spotter about things back in the day. I loved finding out what tracks were. I loved asking people about them. I loved talking to people who knew about tracks. And I remember that there was always this innate desire to want to know more about the music and everything that I was listening to. It super made me happy to just feel like I had an answer to something where I could research this more and just go down an even bigger rabbit hole because, that music was so exciting. It was like, how could you not want to know more about this for me? And I think that's what really, really hit home in such a way. There was a level of obsession that was triggered that was completely unexpected for me within that because I really happened to like really fast syncopated rhythms. And it was just really cool to just see that, not only did it fit for how I lived, eventually I started leaving it as background music for working and other things. And I just realized that I also used it for working out. Like I made my own mixes over the years and I would listen to them and use them as a basis for getting through sessions and, realizing when I had a better mix or a stronger one if I needed for certain things. It was really cool to create your own custom vibe to kind of, just take care of yourself. I think this was always one of those cool things where you realize the real healing power of music. It was very cool to understand that from messing around with our friends' DJ setup back in the early 2000s when vinyl was still very, very not too easy to acquire on the regular. This was still about going out to Georgetown, going out to a key boutique store. Of course, Yoshitoshi. Of course, Modern Music. Of course, a couple other major spots around here. DJ Hut as well too. And I'm just thinking of those like as early impressions off the top of my head. But I try to go to record stores wherever and just pick up vinyl that's local around. I also went to my local thrift shop and picked up secondhand vinyl as well too. But actually a lot of alternative and older stuff. I really like picking up music of different genres and other stuff to just keep as a record as collection because I always thought it was fancy to keep a good jazz collection around. Just one of those things where. You might not have market on this right now, but trust me, you're going to bank in on this later. And it just felt like a really, really cool thing to do. Just classy. It was nice. Records were cumbersome. They're always ridiculous. It was always funny to me how much I'd stuff my record bag and felt like scoliosis was like an achievement and not a side effect. I always was prided on just keeping a lot of things around because the way I started DJing and the way I eventually picked up my style and how I wanted to DJ was that I always felt like you should never, try to not plan out your sets as little as possible. Really, really, live in an uncomfortable state of the flow. When you're uncomfortable, that's good. That's growth. Don't be afraid. For me, a lot of times when I would just do weird mixes, dissonant, harmonies completely off, phased out, just to find out how things were. It was fun to just try that out with vinyl at first and just to see how records go in and out of phase. I was patient enough to take the time to really kind of try to train my ear as much as possible. And I really feel sad for a lot of people these days who are priced out of easily acquiring their ability to do that these days with a DJ setup. I think classical ear training is probably one of those rare gifts that you can give yourself, especially with any analog instrument or any analog variant of it before it all went super hyper digital. Yeah, it's cool that we can do that, and yeah, it's cool that you can do 3 things all at once at the same time that you couldn't before. But if you knew what it was like before and just the sheer, innovation and ability that was involved in it, the sheer muscle memory involved in so many aspects of it, it's a very, very uniquely special thing. And I wish it for everyone who has that opportunity to get that, chance to explore it. I think it's sacred. I think vinyl is really super important, and I really love my collection still to this day. I love talking about it because a lot of people at work sometimes just are like, hey, what's all that stuff that you got back there? I'm just like, hey, I still love collecting vinyl. I really hold it as a real piece of pride. I know it's really kind of a, pet soundy or kind of dorkish, or elitist in its own right, whatever. I mean, I think all of us have our own little, scratches that we itch, or itches that we scratch. Sorry, the other way around. But I love every bit of it. It satisfies a level of particularity within my mind that I can't help but resist paying attention to, that I just care about. So do you have like other questions? Because I feel like I'm just going through like an entire buildup of a lot of things. I could chronicle a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of fun points. There's a lot of things I could share. While I was just going through and doing this stuff, I was also, just learning and playing with Photoshop and learning with illustration and design. And I was doing this through school as well, too, and I was learning web design as well, too. I started early on because, I'd been exposed as a computer science student back at Georgia Tech to, like, a couple of systems and how it all worked and everything. But eventually, I got into, graphic design and started putting together designs for smaller crews and different events and areas in and around the DC area. There's probably some flyers that you've seen before, but they're all smaller events, and I've got like older samples of just like really cheeky stuff, like really corny stuff I've done back in the day. This is kind of like things that I've done just in the beginning, like super ravey, like vintage things. I remember Ivy from, and I think he's down in here, from what is it? From Liquid Prophecy. He was my boy back in the day, Ivy. He really, really put me on, like helped me, put out a lot of designs for old friends and everything, and for parties that he was throwing in Richmond. And he just really was happy to just let me do stuff. I remember this was one of the earliest ones I did, Heart. This was a super, like, you can tell it's just like, cool, he just learned Photoshop after this. Like, you can totally tell. It's got every little stupid, cheesy element that could be there. This was like a version where like probably my first Illustrator flyer, where I was just like, vectors are great. Look, you can size them to anything and they don't lose any quality. And then I make a child, like a child's flyer for a rave that's like, with AK-1200. And it was hilarious, but it was just like, yeah, that's the vibe. That's what it was at that time. They're candy kids. You don't need to make this super technically complex and everything. But, those were happening on the side. I started designing other designs. I did things for different crews, just all kinds of different events. Some stuff for events in Virginia and Baltimore and DC, in other states as well, too. But it was just a really, really fun thing. This was for 5-inch Taint. This was like Timmy and a bunch of people back in the day. There was a group called Bringin' to Poop. I can't remember all the things that I remember, but they were all related to a listserv called DC Raves that I was really, really too frequent on. And that's really where I really wrote too many like reviews and everything. I wrote myself I was Gabriel Knight there. And I wrote really, really long party reviews all the time afterwards, and I wrote like track lists. I wrote like vibes about parties, descriptions. I tried to be like super descriptive, and it was annoying as hell, but it helped me get writing gigs. I even wrote for like what was it, for not Rinse, it was a different publication around that time, but they were covering D&B up and down the East Coast. Pretty well known, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I just remember it getting me a couple of cool, fun magazine gigs where I was able to do some, fun little writing stuff and just try out things. But also, like in terms of like work that I did for DC D&B, eventually I did stuff for Act Your Age. I did stuff for I think it was another event called Volume. Volume was an event that happened back in 2003. Yeah. This was the design that I did for like a Valentine's event.
Now, was Volume a series or was
Volume
it one-off?
was a series of parties. It was like a series of short-lived parties. It was just for like a summer series. I'm trying to see all the flyers that I put together. I also have some series like other ones that I did for like a party in Baltimore called Origin. This was for Sarah S. She was one of the promoters for Buzz, and she did an offshoot party. And we did a series of really fun flyers and designs and just cool stuff. Just really fun stuff out at Fever, actually, basically after Fever had retired. This was the party that took up space there. Other events like Stereo. This was another one that happened back in 2002.
I have this flyer.
Yeah, exactly. Like these were the designs that I did back in the day. Like they were just like, hey, we're just going crazy with lineups. We're going to put insane stuff. And I was told to put a book on a piece of paper like this, and it was ridiculous because it was like, look, if you even read print that small, your eyes are fantastic, and I'm proud of you. Good for you. But it was just fun, just kind of goofing off and messing with silly formats and just trying out stuff. I definitely enjoyed this one. This one with the kid just kind of in his own happy place, just kind of listening to music and everything.
Man, these lamps are ridiculous.
Yeah, they were ridiculous back in the day. The coolest thing with back in 2001, these were like the kind of things, and I remember it. I remember doing things for like CyberQuest. That was like the decor company that did all the stuff for Buzz. That was Raina Pete, and nowadays she still does other stuff, but she's very much on a photography kick these days. I mean, but she's still amazing, and and Haunted House. She does the Haunted House at Markov's. Like she's incredible at that. I know that it's been fun because I got a chance through my connections to eventually meet so many of the cool crews in DC that were really a part of this. Like over the years, I've worked with like 424. This was a crew based out of George Mason. We went to school together, and it was cool to meet Eaton, and it was cool to meet Ben, and also Carlo, and to work with them. And they had a party called Clear, and eventually we just started working on some events. They threw designs. They had some events and all kinds of stuff here. Also, I got a chance to work with Tom B, Ray Casil. At some point, I was also connected to EveCom, and it was very, very cool to work with Jefferson and get his insight and wisdom on a lot of design work and a lot of, how to like set up type and how to just be fun with things and how to be interesting about it. There was a lot of stuff here that was like very much, refined and kind of inspired by him. It was very much that kind of thing. Like this was, all my old tags before. I think at some point I went through like a weird emo design phase where I called myself failure design. It was really silly, but it was such a like woe is me thing, and it was a very, very like I get it, but I think that was the drakiest I've ever been. It was very cringe and it was very, very corny, but I think I at least just tried it with a very bad rebrand and then eventually let that go. I was very glad about that. But this has all been fun. Like over the years, like 2000s, this is what I kept up and doing, and it was still fun to know that I was able to put together a lot of cool print designs and work on different parties and all kinds of different events. Like they're nothing major and nothing special, but they were all part of the scene in their own way. But it was just fun. I remember Decadence. That was a big event over at The Edge. Back on December 31st of 2000, Jay Smooth, Bag of Donuts, East Coast Boogeyman, Wes Smith, Sinestro, Lexus King, all the homies we knew from back in the day.
And this would only fit in a really large pocket.
And that's the whole point. It was just folding. It was ridiculous. There was no respect. It was just like, yeah, I don't care about trees. Let's just yank them out. Let's just go. It was so funny, but it was just fun to be able to have that canvas and to be able to have that time to explore it. Mm-hmm. I also did like logos and type and design for different groups and stuff. Eventually just creating identities for different companies. And that also led into like what I did with web designing.
So now, were you also DJing at this point?
Yeah.
Out, or was this just like, the gateway to get
No,
out?
I was DJing out as well too. I think I don't remember if I have a couple of those flyers that I was on. Some of them are here. I think on Volume and a couple of these, I was listed on them on the ends. Yeah, right there. So a couple of these, I was really lucky to be able to play on some of these. It was definitely fun to be featured, and for me, it was mostly just a chance to always practice the craft. I was always curious about just sharing a lot. I really love sharing the latest music. I always try to keep it future forward. I definitely believed in like the conflict vibe. It was very much kind of like a sharp, dark techno-ish kind of style. But I also believed in really smooth, long, trancey mixes. I was really, really into Oakenfold. I was really, really into Sasha and Digweed. That's where my connection with my old roommate John Seddon was. Like, they were a bunch of trance heads, and they still appreciated that I like drum and bass, but they're like, dude, we're just gonna, go wild all weekend and just listen to some of the most amazing trance. I remember when Fox 5 raided Buzz, and they had the protests, and the place got closed down because of their expose. I remember us going up that weekend. We got into his friend's his friend's BMW, and we went up to Canada. We went up to the border, and we crossed it. We went to Fluid. We went to Fluid in Toronto because we found out Oakenfold had been booked there.
Wow.
And we decided to go see him on the same night. We met him in person afterwards, and it was terrifying because he really does look like. He's got very simian features. Let me put it that way. He's very cool, very awesome, super chill, but he is definitely repping a level of poofiness in the cheeks that I'm like, man, you should get a cheek reduction. It's probably a good idea. But he's a legend. He's always been a legend. I've always loved his music. Transport was like a very, very special chapter in my life, and it was a very special musical period that I bookmark with a lot of special things. So yeah, I won't deny it. It was really just funny because the day after when we came back, of course, the border guard searched the entire car. It was just hilarious because every little shenanigan-y thing that could have been the case, like my mom calling me and being like, you better be home before dinner. And it was just hilarious because it was still like me living with my parents and going through a silly moment being like, I'm crossing the freaking border. I don't even care. It was those rebellious moments that I freaking loved about just, being a raver and being that time. It felt like not only did I have the friends, but I had the circumstances that gave me a safe space to really wild out in a very, very cool way that was able to be recoverable from. I was very lucky. I don't know if a lot of kids get the same vibes these days. I don't know how it works for anyone these days. I don't know if it's that exciting, but I always hope it is. And I just remember that as a very special time because there was a level of like Wonder Years level of innocence, and you could goof off, but you still learn something cool from it.
Right on.
That was it.
So what is Drum Theory?
Drum Theory was an old crew name. That was what I tried to put myself as just for my music identity.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to do as like, well, now I have got Harbinger Industries as my design thing, and I'll do Drum Theory as my music thing. And I eventually just produced, I think, just 2 tracks. It's very sad because I really, really overthought. I think my curse has always been overthinking the process of all this. I was very good, and I really jumped into a lot of things early on with like design, and eventually like I wanted to, help throw parties, and I was really into finding out all these different aspects. It was very funny. I remember myself and a few other friends, we talked about being what the scorecard is for being a perfect raver in the scene. Like what would you need to do to encompass the aspects of saying, yes, I understand this. And as I've truly been on this side, like being a promoter, being a dancer, being into music, creating music, going to events, kind of, surviving a festival, all these little benchmarks that were kind of pseudo made up. But I feel like, it's been fun to kind of think of those over the years and just, work on, experiencing them in their own special way. I'm very happy to have been to places like Berghain. I've been happy to go to places like Burning Man. Should go more, but it's just been a while to kind of work out the wherewithal. I learned so much from that experience, and it also changed so much of my life. I don't think I'm ready for another like massive paradigm shift, and I think there's enough going on in the world as it is already.
Amen.
Yeah, I think it's always challenging, but I think however we learned from when we started in this, I hope all of us have taken the good things and really kind of multiplied them as much as possible, and that's all we can do. So Drum Theory was the music thing. I've really worked on that a little bit. I'm very sad about this because like I said, this goes back to overthinking. As I evolved, my career went into design. Then I stepped away from graphic design and I just do it part-time as like a hobby. I do stuff for like Cadence nowadays. I used to do designs for 3D. Now I just pretty much lightly promote for 3D. I work designs for Cadence, and I really promote that too. But it's mostly been interesting to see how Facebook has become the entire face of what flyers and the entire art of flyers have ever become. Mm-hmm. It's strange to just say you went from this to being like, okay, make sure you always give me a vertical version for Instagram and for every phone and every other variety, and give me the event cover and give me this square version for your profiles. It's interesting to see how the format changed and everything eventually shifted to this. And, I got used to it, but it was saddening because, you were traveling to work and it was on a medium that was never going to go beyond a weekly event. or an event, and after it expired, it was going to go away. I mean, I'm sure other people would have other things where art went, and it was cool, but you know, that I always felt like Facebook killed the flyer in a big way for a lot of things, and it was sad. But I get it. You know, we can't always keep that, and it's more easier to just keep track of things visually and online, and the medium's all changed over time. Speaking of which, like I think you know what I was saying about the music stuff. Again, I love derailing myself. I'm so good at this.
It's all good.
But on the music stuff, I realized that I've tried many times with different friends, with different potential production partners. You know, just people I got close to that were totally into it as well. And it failed often. There wasn't like, I felt like there was always like we need to both be commensurately into it. And I was very strict about a 50-50 rule, about not trying to carry an entire project all the time. And I realized that I let that get in the way of really just trying to just buck up and learn things. And I'm kind of sad about that, because I've been able to really take time on my own these days to really buck up and learn a lot of awesome stuff. Like I'm a solid developer. I work in programming, you know, all the time, and it's cool to learn, and I'm definitely capable of doing it. But I think music's the final frontier, where it's like, man, I feel like that's such a massively expansive field of study. I don't know how I'm going to make all the time for that along with everything else. I think I've used that as a perennial excuse to just say, that's a rabbit hole where you're just never going to get out of rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, okay, maybe that's going to be the case, but what else are you doing with your time? Like you're living, you're you know, saving up money for a bigger house. Is that exciting to you? Like I get where this is all fundamentally, like, you know, useful for people at whatever time when you're able to stabilize and reach your own point of growth and ascension your own way. That's a very important thing. There's nothing to make light about that. But I'm realizing more and more, what I've found out over my rave career is that, and this is what I always yell at with people who are very fussy about like making choices and decisions, the same thing's coming back to hit me now. Year after year, the questions that you haven't answered, you will still keep asking year after year. And you will still wonder why you haven't answered that question. So if you're still asking that question year after year, maybe do yourself a favor and answer that question for yourself, or take the uncomfortable steps to really focus on what it means to try and answer that question. Mm-hmm. It's very hard, but the whole thing I remember from one person was, so they told me, like, the key to mastering anything is to master its adjacencies. You have to understand the stuff that gets up to that point. You can't just master the point. No. It never works that way. And if you did, congrats, fluke. Do it again and make sure that you can show me all the time that you can do it perfectly all the time. Very few people are like Tiger Woods on that level, where they're just a natural auteur and they just have that ability on the jump. And God love you if you do, but I also secretly hate you, because there's enough of people who flex on that all the time. And that's why I deleted Instagram and all those apps. Like, and that's another thing that I realized, like what I loved about being a DJ and a musician and someone where I worked in art and what I did, I got a lot of props from like promoters and people in the scene, and it felt very fun to feel a sense of like pseudo clout about this. And it was cool because this was a simple medium where you created something, people saw it, they either liked it or they didn't, but you created something and they knew what you were doing. They understood your establishment and what you were trying to represent and push forward. And so many things, of course, naturally evolve and fragment in a different way where, yeah, it's not in your control. And I get that, but I mean, there's like what I'm saying just before, like I'm saying here, just like when I mentioned all these flyers and events, it's sweet. It reminds me I'm feeling very warm and very reminiscent of a special time when it was fun to even remember flyering cars and creating stuff. I mean, literally, I'm looking at a flyer called Nostalgia. This is a flyer that 5-inch taint in 424. And I think, a bunch of friends did back in the day. My old roommates, Switch Dance and Jen Lasher, I used to live with them. They were, breakbeat DJs. They were legends back in the day. They also helped me by letting me practice on their stuff. And Jathan's still awesome, and Jen's still amazing. And she does amazing music out in Texas, I think, nowadays. But old heads that we remember, Titsworth, DJ Mist, Hope and Krishna, Carlo, like DJ Sun, Eden, Tai T, like Morpheus, Tom B, Ray Casile, like all these homies, Sheila Storms, it's so cool to see all these old names and to still know that I'm still friends and connected to them in so many ways. And over the years, got the chance to even connect and create stuff like this. Mm-hmm. It's fun because we all have those little time capsule moments, but I guess what I realized that I really am proud of over the time as I looked at this is however you jump in, maybe it's the thing my grandfather said before he passed. He was just like, whatever you do, make sure you make a good mark in it. just have fun and really participate, be part of it.
I mean, you've already made a mountain of marks all over this place.
There's some stuff. Yeah, it's just fun to go back and remember that I did this, and it's very cool. I just am pleasantly surprised. It's not really that much when I think of it, but there's a whole bunch of online work that's just totally different. Mm-hmm. One of the other blessings that I had that, around that time while working with Eve Communications was that he got connected with BuzzLife, and I got to work on DJ Feelgood and Scott Henry's websites at the time. Wow. I got to build them. It was super awesome because they gave me their classic mixtape collections. I wanted to bring all that stuff, but that was in a secret Rave trunk that I have with a whole bunch of other things that I would just be like, look, we'd be going on for hours. I mean, you'd have to bring me back for parts.
I think this is part 2, and or maybe we make it a mobile thing.
It can be a whole thing. It can be an ongoing saga, but there's plenty of stuff, and I think you could make an entire series called Rave Trunk Stories, which makes a lot of sense because everyone has a Rave trunk.
Serious.
Whether you know or not, it's really true, and it's very, very there, and I think that in itself becomes its own kind of personal potpourri for how you grew up and what you loved and what you visited and what you experienced in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that chance of being able to work with the Buzz crew, with being able to hang out with them, that to me was like the height. I was like, oh my God, like I was so absolutely about it. It was really great to just know them regularly and be connected in a way and share all that stuff. And around that time, playing music, I was really lucky because I was smart enough to somehow still save enough money, got my set of first turntables like early to mid 2000s, like after moving out of my living with my friends. I went back and lived in my basement back at my parents' house to save money, but I was just like, I gotta get this, I have all this vinyl, I gotta play it somehow. Got my own DJ setup, started playing at home. My brother was also living there at the time too, because he was just in high school, and it was just cool because with Amit, with Kinetics MC, I was really lucky because I just showed music that I loved. Like he would just hear me playing it, and at the time he was dating someone who was also really into the music, and she was like, getting him to like pay attention to it and just like be into it, and we'd listen to it more and more and share. It was like, dude, you're DJing this. This is really cool. Like, what is this? Like it was just fun to share a very exciting slice of my life with my younger brother and just be like, I don't know what you're gonna get into, but I think this is pretty cool. Maybe you can check it out. Maybe there's something there, And, like he was already heavy into hip hop. I wasn't paying enough into that. But over time, we cross-pollinated, and it was so special to me because it's how I stayed connected with them as we grew up. We shared so much of that. I still made mixes. I eventually got into finally having the courage to record straight vinyl mixes. And when I started that, after I got my DJ set up, I think that's where I realized why I feel so intimidated about making actual music. I felt like the level of complexity involved with like mixing analog music at the time when I was doing it. I had a Vestax PMC 7A, the classic, time-honored OG mixer. If you were a DJ that started, you knew that, or you knew some variation of Vestax or some variation of Hercules or some ridiculous anything. Yeah. But that was the beginner, and it was so valuable because it had cool faders, and it had just a way where I remember the EQs and the way that you could cut things out, and that's what really inspired my mixing style. I really love long, dramatic, flowing, connecting mixes where you're taking out the mids, you're taking out the highs, you're taking out the lows, you're letting them kind of sit and kind of mix together and simmer like a soup and kind of come together as a completely new sound. The key to it was not blowing out the bass, of course, because they weren't EQ'd and mastered properly at the same levels back then. So you always had to watch for that. But it was really fun figuring all that stuff out and using that as part of like how I just started mixing. I remember going with like Ram Trilogy, and I remember going with Ed Russian Optical. I remember going with, like just old collections. I remember going with Bukum CDs and just listening to the way he mixed. And I loved how it just was this continuous flow, and it was amazing. And I'm pretty sure I got spaced out a couple of nights and, really, really was inspired by that style because, the atmosphere and the way that he would conduct this emotional landscape was really such a integral part of what I felt like what was so special in presenting yourself to others. Mm-hmm. I felt like it really was a big influential part of what made my musical style what it is today, which is very melodic, very like funk oriented, very jazzy stylist, and very rhythmic, heavily, drum focused, but it will go through everything and anything. And I really love the ability to now have the ear training and the fluidity to go through halftime to, tech step to something really amen filled, and to be able to go between all the rhythmic patterns there and to know exactly how it can fit in. And it was so cool. And I remember one key part, and this was while following DJs and eventually getting a chance to talk to, bigger people in the scene, Damien Diesel Boy around 2000. Like, he was such a big part of my evolution as a DJ and a performer, because I was absolutely enamored by his mixing style. I was like, how do you make it this fluid? How do you make it this perfect? How do I do that? Like, that was the instant, I was absolutely infatuated with that. And, that's a big part of what I wanted to find out. I remember going to a party in Baltimore called Believe back in 2000. And I remember him DJing, and I remember, I'm getting emotional because it's just a very, very special moment. But I remember talking to him afterwards, just watching him mix during his entire set, and just talking to him for a short minute. I was like, dude, how do you mix? How do you do it? And he just gave me the most elegant piece of advice I'd ever heard. He just said, just mix on the 16s. That's it. That's it. It was so simple and so succinct. He gave me the foundational piece of advice that I think any DJ or any person could learn, where counting matters. That's where phrasing matters. That's where understanding the structure of music and why a song builds a certain way matters. That's how you construct a better narrative or a meta narrative for your audience. When you understand the music, you're understanding building blocks of smaller stories and constructing them into a grander story. And for me, that was such a foundational piece of knowledge that locked in, that helped me kind of understand it was the piece of technical knowledge that I needed to understand that unlocked how I would change, how I would narrate my own, music and vibes, and how I presented everything that I wanted to play over time. It was very cool, because once you have the way you know how to walk, then you're like, well, is it going to be a dark walk? Is it going to be a moody one? Is it going to be a goofy one? Is it going to be, something really heavy and serious? It was cool because at that point you really could let your life and how just the way things were going dictate what you put down, when you just sat in front of two turntables and you recorded a set. The hardest thing back then for me was really just having the courage to say, I saw it the way Damien did it too. He did end to end. It was just vinyl, you mix it, you rock it, one shot, you do it correct. If you don't put it out, it's not the way. And it was a very, very harsh philosophy at some level that I realized at some point that thankfully I amended on, but it was something that was so important because I felt like you need to shoot for a high standard first. Because wherever you go, you'll land at some variant of that high standard. That's the goal. That's why they say shoot for the moon. Mm-hmm. You'll at least reach some of the stars. That's the corniness of that statement, but it makes sense because it's just saying whatever it is, put whatever discipline you can while you have the focus in your mind to do it before you give up. Everything has a time limit, and I think that's what's so special. Coming from India, realizing that our parents really drilled us with you got to be the best in class, you've got to do it, you cannot do less than that. And, it was very, very real how that advice came through, but it was a mantra that was chanted just to say, there's no point in just sitting around and just waiting for something to come to you. You're in the land of finding everything, so go find everything. Mm-hmm. And that was a very good driving force, I think, for all of my siblings and all of us. I'm very glad where we are today. We're all very fluidly, well-respected individuals in our own right, subject matter experts, if you will, in our own respective fields. And I'm very proud of all of us. I'm very proud of Kinetics MC, recently, selling out parties with Cadence and his #1 record coming out on Roughneck Things. It's just the fun stuff where you realize over time the emotional investment that you make with family, with friends, the little things that you never know that's going to turn out into something. Blows my mind. It blows my mind. I'm so thankful and so lucky and so overjoyed. And I hope anyone listening out there, if you have friends and people that are new in the scene, influence them. Keep them, interested in stuff that you love. Keep that fire that you have and share that fire with them. Sometimes it's actually more important than religion because honestly, it's its own religion. And I think it's about just awakening that creativity, about that understanding within each other, because that's what helps keep subcultures going. That's what helps keeps, new people thriving and going through everything. And beyond preaching, you know, I was just glad to see so many of those different connections and the people that I met and the advice that I had received and the time. Like, I think all of us can say we all have moments where we've weaved in and out of the scene. Sometimes we've taken a step back. Life just hit hard. Other things just had to take a front seat. But it was nice to still see over time there were friends and connections that kept me in the loop, that still kept me like engaged in it, and still shared tracks, shared music, and was like, dude, we should go out. You've been really like hard up about stuff. You know, you're a real stick in the mud. Don't do that. You know, people just help you get out of that funk. And it was so great. And I think that's what I miss nowadays. That's one of those little things that I realize. I mean, I'm 45 myself. Like, it's wild to think of it that way, because I still think I'm very young at heart. But that's just facts, you know, like, I'm an old man. And it's fun to go from that time back in 18 to, you know, doing wild stuff like going to parties and throwing all the events. I didn't even talk about the time I was on National Geographic. I can't even believe we haven't even gotten to that. I'll get to that. But it's just one of those things where, you know, being 45 now and just seeing like the way the ripples and the little things you touch, the things you create, the stuff, whatever. Yeah, it's really, really, really easy to discredit myself, because the whole time I've been a really depressed kid that's really been unfortunate and very, very, very. I've made some really bad decisions in life on my own, which really could have gone better. But I'm still so lucky to have still been able to create really, really cool stuff and really fun things that I'm really glad to say, you know, that's the complexity of, I think, how life works out. We all imagine that it's going to be like this fixed average of how you're going to proceed and grow. And it's this really weird, nasty, kind of funky line of progression. It's not set and straight. That's life having its own average with you. I mean, that's what COVID was for all of us. Every class and every level was instantly hit at that point where it's like, nah, fuck your dreams. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And that was the whole point. Everyone got a chance of silence to be like, oh, I'm not in control at all. Shit, maybe I should act more irrationally sometimes or do other wild things. And if not now, when? Mm-hmm. That was the mantra that I heard from a lot of people. And that's the mantra I was even saying for myself. That helped me get outside and remember to meet people and still kind of share uncomfortable situations when I could. Even though I was still scared about some parts of it, you know, it was a wild thing. But yeah, like, I went to 45, COVID, you know, we just talked about a little bit of that. We can loop back to what I just said, which was, yeah, I was on National Geographic once, and it was a wild time because it was an episode about doing drugs. And it was all about taboo. This was a really, really fun time back in 2001. I think I have the record on YouTube. Let me see if I can pull up some record of what this was. I'm gonna date myself, but I have a rogue clip that I shared that I still kept in my profile. But it was me. It was Taboo Season 1, Episode 7. It was an original version of the clip. Where myself, James Brennan, Raina Pete, I think my friend Simone Key, my girlfriend at the time Tamar, and a couple other, or ex-girlfriend now, of course, at the time we got a chance to go into an opportunity where we basically talked about the rave scenes under the influence of really, really good ecstasy. And just talked about it openly with friends, talked about the evolution of the scene, talked about the evolution of dance and styles and, you know, how people act and how we use it as a, you know, what we do as, you know, our psychological crutches, how we feel about where we're at as individuals in the scene, what we're trying to achieve as people and how we're connecting and what we love about certain things, why we love house, why we love drum and bass and every little part of that. I remember at some point I was pulled off to the side and I was like talking about, you know, Alexander Shulgin and how he did classical experiments on it. Like, it was very ridiculous, but it was a fun and amazing experience because it was something where I literally opened a pill of ecstasy and poured the powder in my tongue on TV, and they recorded the interaction of me doing that. And the first person that saw that, I never even saw the original video as it was released. I was like, oh, you're going to hell now. You know, it was one of those kind of things where I just was like, oh, you're done. And it was hilarious because my dad saw it before I even did. And he saw me do that, and the only thing I was thinking, I was like, man, I had the most fucked up haircut. I looked so terrible. I looked like a butthole on steroids. Like, it was just terrible. And it was just one of those things where I just needed to just remember that and just have a real moment of reckoning to be like, yeah, Dad, what do you think of that? oh yeah, F you. Like, it was definitely my moment of like quiet rebellion against the God, because, growing up in an Indian family, there's a lot of like, dealing with multiple standards of living and harshness, and, you do as I say, not as I do. And it was very much like that in its own respect. It's all great now, but, there were always challenges, because living amongst a culture shock of being American, being Indian, and then finding the right volume and the right time to manage all that was its own little, maze in its own right. I think every immigrant parent or every immigrant family knows that, you had your own kind of rites of passage internally and externally on various levels of all kinds of cultural differences, and that's just normal. I really appreciated that, because in the end, I realized how much I love Italian food, and now I make that all the time. So I don't care.
There you go.
It works out. Like, you get exposed to all kinds of different stuff. You pick out the stuff you like. You eventually get into what you really don't. I think that's the whole point of what it was to be, in this nation. Like, at least the earlier version of it. Nowadays, hey, that's a whole different thing. We don't need to touch too deep on that, but it's been super fun. Like I said, there's been a lot of really cool stuff, and just what I said on the thing on National Geographic, that was a really fun experience. It was hilarious to talk to a lot of friends, and they're like, dude, I saw you, it was so silly. And I was just like, yeah, that was wild, wasn't it? It just felt like a really fun moment in pure rebellion, kind of just like goofy teenagedom. I still felt like a real kid at heart. I still feel immature as hell right now. Like, I don't want to grow up. Growing up is a trap. And, I'm very happy in that thing. But yeah, I think about those moments earlier on in life. Like, I remember, I would say it's weird now that I think about this right now, but I think about Married with Children, like that old TV series. Al Bundy, he always remembered and reminisced how high school was so great. To a certain extent, I understand that feeling just a little bit more now in my, older age. Of course, because, you have lots of things to reflect on. And back during, my scene days, or just earlier in my 20s and 30s, like in the scene, it was super fun to feel like a much more popular and engaged guy. These days, I'm definitely there. I think all of us have kind of, gravitated towards our own spaces. But I miss having like a good group set of friends that I normally hang out with on the weeks. I don't do that as often anymore, and it's something I'm trying to kind of break a habit on, this summer, and kind of change back to. I miss just having a good set of friends and having my own kind of personal cheers in a certain way, and just kind of establishing that more again. I think, with the pandemic, everyone had their own set of recalibrations that they had to go through, and some people's cycles kind of went longer than others. And I also, know that, over time, I was very lucky to have probably way more amazing relationships with women who are way more out of my league over the years. And that distorted my own personal perception of my own self-worth and value, and, what I should be and where I am and who I am and why I am what I am, whatever. There was always insecurities about everything, but I would definitely be lying if I didn't say, I think Russell Peters said it best, if I go to America and get white woman, I'm ahead of the game. Like, it's a silly, very rude, racist thing to say, but it was an honest to God truth about just the mentality of approaching assimilation in society and succeeding, and that being a sign of success. Okay? Like, come on. I mean, I'm sorry, but if anyone saw you at that point, it's like, he's doing well. It was just a matter of fact of whether someone liked it or not. You probably had that thought cross your mind to be like, well, there's got to be something that works there somehow. And it was special. It was a very cool feeling, and I got really spoiled by that in a lot of circumstances where, as a designer, as a developer, I enjoyed probably more fake fame than what I should have ever thought I had. And it's humbling nowadays, because it's more just no, you're just a guy. You're talented, but you're just a guy. And there's plenty of other people who have been coming up on their own, and eventually it's just real. It's just the aging factor of, as times change, other people will grasp onto the level of, where you've been, what you've done, what you've gone through. Don't take it too personally. And I think that was also part of the growth of just taking time through whatever wild rides I've had in the scene. Like, like I said, what I've given you is just some marquee stories. There have been, of course, darker times, when, relationships, fallouts, I've worked on parties before. I remember events that I helped throw. And I don't mean like there were bad times. There were just challenging times when, throwing events and promotions and keeping steady at the ritual of being part of that. There was a grind aspect to it. You got to embrace it and realize, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad this is super special for you. I'm glad you're super excited. I got to get this thing done, and I got to get ready for the next one. Like, it's a natural thing to understand for a lot of people involved, where enthusiasm and your connection to the scene and what you get into, eventually that branches into a different area, because as you become a working professional behind the scenes, say from like just doing benign things, taking photos of events and doing stuff, then you create your own little service, then you create like your own business, then you represent that regularly as something as you manifest into. I've seen plenty of friends go in their own direction for that, and OGs like Sideshow Bob deserve all the smoke for all the classic vibes and everything that he's captured over the years, and I just really appreciate that. But it was fun to see how people took their time and their efforts in the scene and with technology and everything that they manifested themselves into, and making that part of what they did. Seeing all those vendor tables on the side, I was very curious to see how they evolved over the years, how all these different subcultures and little aspects of it all were there. Festival culture, dance culture, this was all concert culture. This was all the same stuff I saw as a kid growing up, being into ska just before I got into jungle, which was hilarious. It was just like, thank God I did, because at least I felt like I was like a maximum level of, okay, this is about as far as I think you can take your love of guitar music on this level. Like, go back to the classics, but not this fast all the time. But yeah, that's fun, but just for like a semester or two. Cool. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I finally found drum and bass and jungle, and then I was like, okay, this is totally your speed. This is it. This is really where you should stay, and you should bask in this glow and enjoy this vibe all the time. Gosh, I've really gone all over the map.
Dude, and we've made it this far, and we still haven't actually answered, where did the DJ name come from?
DJ name
started with Seven, yeah. And then...
Oh, well, the funniest thing is that DJ name came from a joke from a kid back in my high school that I knew back in the day named John Michelangelo. He used to be in some of my classes, and he was a real kind of bully and just kind of like a troublemaker. I just remember at one point we were in metal shop together, and this was junior or senior year. And at some point, randomly, just one time at class, he looked at me, and then he just yelled out to everyone. He was like, 7 days in a week. And then that became like the initial joke. And somehow he tied that together, and people laughed at it, and I thought it was funny. But over time, I listened to it more whenever he would say it. And it was just really clever. It was a super easy way to know my name. I was like, man, this makes a lot of sense. This guy's really kind of speaking some sense here. Yeah, it might be funny to him, but I can really turn this around once I'm outside of this whole clique. Once they don't know me, everything's going to change. It was fun. So Seven came along very quickly just as soon as I started collecting records. And once I was behind a DJ setup and started, thinking about trying to even make a mix, that's when I was like, well, what do you call it? I was like, I'm DJ Seven. And it was just a corny, just started to just saying, well, I don't want to make it too specific. I don't need to make it too serious, but that sounds cool enough. Mm-hmm. And that was really the thought process there. And they're like, well, why DJ 7? Well, because there were 7 days in a week. And eventually, over time, I had that for a long, long time. I had that probably till 2018 or 19. And then after a while, it was just like, 7 Days In makes a lot more sense because that's really more tied to my name right away. Because you tie that, you just say that as one thing. It's like, what's 7 Days In? I'm like, Avik. And that's it. You can just answer the question very easily. It's very neat and cheeky. And it really always helped. I would say it's also really worked, and it's also very corporate compatible. So it totally just fit for all genres. It kind of fit my personality as I grew up. It still kept me young and kind of plucky and exciting, but at the same level, it's kind of, there was layers of sophistication to it that I appreciated. And it just goes back to your name. I always felt like DJs who had just random, DJ monikers or something stupid, I was like, come on, take this more seriously. Come on. It's cool, but tie it back to your, or give me a cool story. And it's fine, at least have a cool story for why you have that name. That's really my base requirement. And it was because a kid made fun of me in high school. Eventually our ways drifted, and I used that and turned it around and got to meet everybody through that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. 7 days in.
Nice.
7 days in a week. That's why. So yeah, that was really the whole thing. It was. It's always worked since then. It's always fit nicely since then. And it's just been kind of a natural part of just what it is. I also like that it encompasses the basic unit of time. How we always look at everything. We're like, we just got to get to that weekend, man. And I love that, it just goes to a certain level of just there's an all-encompassing qualm to it. Where it's just look, it's you, but it's you over time. And it's literally the evolution of you. And it's like, well, what's happening with you? It's like, well, there's 7 days in me. What do you want to know? There's a lot of things. There can be anything, but it gave a fractional introduction, and it was just a cheeky way to, say hello and get to know people. And once they knew my name, I really liked that more. I couldn't understand how people took 4 letters and messed it up. Avik, Avik, like whatever. I'm like, it's Avik. It's Avik. I didn't like the fact that Avik the Geek was the other thing John Michelangelo used to also yell a lot back in high school, and it was totally where I was like, I don't want that one. I'll take the other one. So that's where, you know, he had his fair share, but he'd throw them out, and it was just like his type 5. It was funny as hell because it was just like that's the material to keep people like engaged in something or just, you know, not bored. But it totally worked out, and it was great because cut down material became workup material, and it really worked to my benefit over the years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Wow, we've really chatted on a lot of different aspects. I think I've spilled enough fair tea on my own about things, but there's always more to talk about. There's a lot of fun details, but I think more of the fun stuff is just getting the chance to share this with you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah,
it's been really
man.
cool. I don't know what else I can, I mean, there's always stuff to talk about. We could talk about, you know, events and crews and all kinds of stuff. Like, I remember like really awesome memories. Like I remember events with Too Tough that I helped do designs for. I did stuff for Jungle Big Business back in the day for 2013. I remember having Randall and Brian G out over at Patty Boom Boom. I remember doing stuff over there, and that was a great venue. The sound system was incredible, and I miss it because Randall was fucking just on point funny like he always was. He was making us lose our sides. I remember The Infamous laughing so hard, like just viciously clear memories. And speaking of The Infamous, I love knowing that he and I had a connection back in the day where back at Buzz, we actually spun like tag team sets in the Jungle Room. Like at some point we had done Seven and The Infamous, and we actually did that with vinyl and all kinds of stuff. And I remember it being so funny because literally even in the live crowd, we had not talked about the way we would progress a set, and I would be trying to chill things out. He's like, no, fuck it, I'm playing A-Mans. And it was a constant like play off of that, and it was hilarious because it was those things where I'm like, you know, we could have just talked about this, and I would have totally been on board with whatever direction we chose. But it was funny to just evolve and grow through those points where you were nervous as hell, young, foolish, dumb, trying your best, thinking that it was okay, but probably it was like, eh. And it was just funny because I think I took so much of that so seriously. I let that overshadow a lot of things in life where I wish I hadn't, but at the same time, I still had fun with it. I think there was always those points where I think when we were younger, I think there were certain parts of it where I just remember like going to like ultra world parties and being like, oh my God, this is bigger than the universe. This is the most amazing thing I've ever imagined in my entire existence. It's like, dude, it's a big space. It's a giant party. There's logistics. There's things happening. There's systems behind you. All right. Just watch out for that cop over there. You know, like little things like that were like a totally good thing to focus on. But I just realized how far left field I was at the same time where it was like, stay grounded at all times. And that was always one of those things where it was very fun to have. That's where you got to have a really good friends group who really watches out for you and cares for that stuff. Or at least you have someone who knows how to shepherd a situation properly when it gets down to that. You really need to make sure that you diversify those friend groups for those purposes. It's very fun to have different cliques over the years in high school, and then using that same transitional ability to be like, all right, let's go hang out with the jockey people. Let's go hang out with the DC freestylers. Let's go hang out with 5-Inch Taint. Let's go hang out with Too Tough. Let's go hang out with Buzz. Let's go see what all these different groups are about. Some were more elitist. Some were more down to earth. Some were more mad thuggish. And it was just funny because everybody literally represented a different style of every different aspect of what was the rave scene at that time. And it was so cool. Like every bit of what you saw in Human Traffic was like, yep, we had our own version in DC with their own variants, and it was just as crazy. And Hare Krishna turned into a bad boy, and it was exactly what you wanted to see. And it was just perfect. It was just a beautiful encapsulation because I was very lucky to be a part of a group of individuals that was just as much in the thick of it all in such a cool way, but also equally able to take the time and just be like totally themselves and goofy and relaxed. And I got to see inner verses of people's minds in very fun and hilarious and serious and sad ways too. Yeah, it was very, very cool, and I feel so blessed and lucky to have been able to talk about a fraction of this with you.
Dude, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, any of the questions I may have had just went right out the window because you just ran with it. So how did you end up getting involved with Cadence? And
Cadence had been around for a long time. I mean, this was just other friends in DC just eventually throwing events. Sean and Jeff and all of them, they kind of coalesced their own gravity, and Amit kind of eventually becoming a natural part of it, that also had its own life and trials on its own, because we were seeing a lot of crews kind of vie for each other for presence and talent, and who was gonna be a part of it and who was gonna help push things forward. And it was very interesting because over time, as things evolved, going away from working on web projects for stuff, then it was actually helping throw parties. Around 2013, I helped with a couple of friends to throw an event called Drop, and that was out in Baltimore. It was a short-lived party where we did it for probably about a year or so, but it was where I was doing the graphic design for it and just helping with just the setup and getting gear and helping take care of stuff for the DJs and everything. It was pretty low-key, but it was a cool experience because I got to learn a lot about the mechanics and just how it all worked, and how things were put together. Also just it was interesting to just get an upfront kind of sampling of just inner politics. I hadn't been so much about it, and I hadn't been just aware of it. I was totally naive about it. Didn't care about it. Didn't think it was a big deal. I was like, well, it's for the music, guys. Come on, let's focus on that. And it was very like a plucky, happy-go-lucky guy. But I eventually, you got to see where the human factor eventually seeps in for everything. And over time, like after like finally 15, 20 years in the scene, that's when I finally had my moment where I was like, oh, this isn't all that fun anymore. And it was part of getting old, and part of it was just like, just knowing how certain people would react about things and realizing that you could call certain factors. It was unfortunate pattern recognition that just came with the aspects of just knowing things and people and history and events and things better than others over time in the scene. And you had people who were crazy. I had my moments where I was crazy and ridiculous and absolutely unhinged in my own right, and I know that I've definitely had my own moments too, which I'm very careful about, because I totally know that I'm also just as much privy to what I'm crying out on. I fucked up a lot. I made lots of mistakes with friends, with family, with people around, with thinking certain things were way more important than what they really were. Losing perspective, and especially I think that can obviously happen when you're taking any certain amount of drugs at a certain point in time. This was 20 years ago, and yeah, it was more of a habit where I would definitely partake in some sort of psychedelic and just enjoy it with it and make that part of the routine of what I enjoyed. And probably, yeah, you can take that too far. And it was very nice to finally meet groups of friends and groups of people who just displayed different habits. And ultimately what I found out, the best thing that helped me so much was meeting super smart people who were very passionate about the fields and what they did in their life and what they loved beyond the rave scene. I didn't see that in my own connections and my own systems close to home, because I didn't know that those existed. I just didn't know that was possible. I was like, you can love what you do? Holy crap, you don't have to suffer through everything all the time? It's not always hell and handbaskets? Okay, cool, this is crazy, But getting to see other people who are just so passionate, technical friends of mine who are, network admins and IT and infrastructure people who are into Unix environments and servers and technology on a level that I had never heard before. Mm-hmm. Their obsession was what I really began to latch on more to, because I realized there was so much more than what I could ever imagine. Like, your mind's always growing. And that's a relief, because even now, just from 5 seconds ago, I know how much bigger things are to me than what they were before. And I think that's always important, to stay humble and to remember that. But technology was such a big path for me, just finding where I am in my future now. It was about me understanding the greater, zen about how all this works, why this works, why would we get into it, why do you think sound and all this stuff comes from, how does it work with electronics and frequency, and how does it work with you creating an on-off signal. It was fantastic to understand how interconnected all these factors were, because it opened up the fact of, not only were you immersed in the results of this future that you're enjoying, but now you're deep in the decoding of how you want to see how you can make it even more part of your life. And it was super exciting. I also was lucky around that time, because I also had a time where I was working for television. I worked for Atlantic Video. I worked in DC over here, and it was great because around that time I got a chance to work for graphic stuff for TV for Around the Horn, for Pardon the Interruption for ESPN on that show. It was super cool working on that back in the day. And also, I got to meet people from The Daily Show. I got to meet Stephen Colbert before he got to be Stephen Colbert. I got to meet Mo Rocca. I met Jon Stewart. It was really, really fun. Like, just cool stuff in the TV industry where I didn't know that stuff was happening, but it was cool to see where regional crews finally got out of their place, did a shoot out of norm, and then all of a sudden you were in the midst of this, and you got to see how scripts were made. You got to see how shows were edited. It was very cool getting into that part, and also having the side life in music and everything, and still being so connected to aspects of what it was in this life. I think this was one of the greatest gifts that our parents gave us, like this ability to come from India, from Calcutta, India, all the way here, and eventually to be connected so close to the heart of, like, you know, the most powerful place in the world. Like, for us, it was a myth, and it was a myth realized in one generation's time in such a crazy way, where it was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And it was so fun to be able to do this and be a part of this, and to grow that professionally while I was raving my head off in parties and going out to wherever and learning about this entire subculture on the side. I felt like, yeah, so much of what I've enjoyed through everything, thick and thin, all the good, all the bad, everything. It's been like the best freaking gift of life that I've been so grateful to enjoy and be a part of and to contribute towards. It's one of those things where I think if you blink, you'll miss it very quickly. Like, you can forget, like, how much you really, really care about something if you don't think about it and reflect on it once in a while. So thanks for this. I mean, again, it's really wild to just go through all these different aspects and to talk about all the stuff that I shared and just experienced. And it's just really, really, gosh, it's profound. Like, all this time I think about it, that was like, what is this, like 27 years? 27 years, and 2 years like in, when I finally started like going to parties, I started collecting vinyl, just quietly putting it on the side and making sure I kept it. And I started, you know, playing with people's record players whenever I got a chance to go over there and just try it out. And I just remember how it just built step by step. The obsession just grew, but they were like definite, like, milestones, people you met, moments you shared, interviews you had. I remember back in 2016, there was a time when I was with Moody Moore, and I was like blown away. Not only was it like incredible because the Banshees were a big deal in DC, I was like all about understanding them as like their power and presence as a super group here, and it was amazing to be dating the head of the Banshees. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it was just beyond me to believe it. And it was so special. And one of the coolest things we did was create a podcast series and an interview series where we had friends from DC bring in mixes every week. Like, it was wild. We did a series, and it was called the Soul Stealer Sessions back in 2016. It's on my SoundCloud, actually.
Okay.
I still host episodes, but we got into a period where we were both DJs. We loved doing it. This was like, let's Wonder Twin powers activate and create really cool stuff together and make a mix series and a podcast. And I know we'll do interviews. And we did interviews. They were the goofiest, like, wildest, most hilarious, but also most serious, drunken interviews of every famous DJ that was coming to town at that time. And whenever we got a chance, we'd be able to sit down with them before or after the party, and it was hilarious if it was after the party. I remember like interviewing Ed Rush and Optical and talking to them about the stuff, and I remember talking to them about the design of the Creeps album and how we were talking about how they were fans of like vintage movies and drive-in experiences and vintage sci-fi experiences. It was like, dude, I totally see it. Like, I was kirking out so hard with Ben Settle and freaking Matt Optical just talking about this, and it was amazing to just go through that moment because I remember the sheer height of enthusiasm and the intensity of it. I remember throwing myself into Logic and being like, you're going to work more in the DAW, you're going to get more used to it, you're going to be more comfortable with everything, you're going to create your magic formula to produce, you're going to put out a new episode every week. And that's what we did for 52 episodes straight. We did that, and then we kept going, and we did a whole bunch of them. Then we slowed it down to like every 2 weeks, and then eventually we kind of went our own thing. And then, you know, her and I, we had our own differences and kind of went our own way. She still kept it up with her own show, Attitude Adjustment, and she kept the podcasting habit for her own vibe and everything. And I just loved it because it was great to still see the tradition just go on. It's like, hey, we both have music in our hearts, represent it to the best of our ability, show love back to the city that, you know, made us and always contributed to us and put us on when no one else would. And it's been super special, and I love that memory. I love that what I do now here at Eaton, was just now the sesh. You that's what evolved from time in the pandemic. I was like, man, I miss this so much. I miss just kicking a sesh with my friends. I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to call it.
By the way, plug that show, man.
No, I mean, it's just my own show here. Just what I do every second Sunday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time, depending on how the sun's going. It's what I do right here every second Sunday, and I usually announce it online. I'll try and be more active about it this summer, but I'm definitely trying to get in more DJs and feature more people from the scene as well too. It's more about the fact that what I really love is that in my job, I'm very, very comfortable being technical in what I do. I work from home. I'm very, very easygoing. I program all day, and I'm very comfortable. I mean, I just literally came home from installing a brand new AI in my own house, custom, to work with my own home assistant setup so that I can now just chat with it and ask it random things about that stuff, and I don't have to ask it in the cloud at all. And it's cool, but that's the nerdy stuff I've done, but that's kind of like a workaround to saying I should probably hang out with some more friends more often. It's a real thing. It's one of those things where I realized part of the thing that I wanted to even talk about while I was here was the self-realization that I love what I've been able to do and grow and manifest over the years, and how I've been able to pay attention and do so many things. I think diversity is the key to growth. Trying everything and not being afraid of it. Whatever you're afraid of, just take that moment and just, like I said, just master that adjacency slightly, bit by bit, day by day. It's one of those things that's kept me very comfortably obsessed with my time. But I realize as I'm growing older, it's not fun unless you can share more things with people around you in a more meaningful way that really kind of gets it. I mean, social connection is natural, but I've gone for about 2 years without a serious relationship, and it's one of those things that I think about. I'm like, hey, there's more to this. Get out more and go see more. So I'm hoping I just can kind of remind myself through this chat that I'm having online and recorded to just say, hey, remember to do that more this year. And I think that's really what I wanted to just say, because it's been very easy with the pandemic to kind of very easily self-isolate, and it's been probably too comfortably easy for me in my case. It's a great grand thing where I'm really glad I'm very comfortable with exploring the inside of my own mind and my own intellect and my abilities and what I can do and create and how far I can take it. But if you just nerd out with yourself into an infinite spiral, you got to go somewhere to eat once in a while. You got to hang out and just catch up on other things. And I think that's rare. Yeah, I think after all this reflection and everything about going out, I still love it because I'm just coming off of the fact that, with the sesh being a nice monthly thing, there's still designs and work that's done for Cadence. There's my brother, God bless him, he puts me on for shows. I don't ask for gigs anymore these days, and I'm always thankful for anyone who puts me on for them, and he still loves listening to how I play it, and it's really nice because things have come kind of full circle. I'm so proud of him. With Kinetics MC, it's so awesome to see how he's kind of grown into his own. The most amazing thing I can say, and probably with a lot of people in drum and bass who know a familial connection. I think of New Tone and Logistics. I think of brothers who have grown up in the scene that have contributed to it, that understand that. There's a very special, unique connection that is undeniably almost kind of like a twin language in a very, certain way. It's just exposure to it that just says, we grew through this together, and it helped us define ourselves together in a very special way. And yeah, we kind of feed back and forth off of that. He still puts me on in ways where just the gig that, I played for Zero T just this last weekend, we had a sold out show for them while he was in town, and I was opening for him, and I was terrified. I was just oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe that after a crazy month at work where I was covering for another employee who was just out on vacation. They were out for an extended vacation, and it was fine, but it got really intense at times, and I was just exhausted. I was just man, I'm at this point where I'm can I just sit down and crawl and die in a hole and just disappear? Really, I'm so over this. But I'm so glad that I overcame that feeling, because this is one of those things that you realize over time. And the more you have time in, even for you to do your normally habituated things, to be the librarian, to do the show, to host the thing, to eventually put people on, to go through all the meta effort that before this, all the planning, all the thoughts, all the scheduling, all the stuff, the pre-work. No one talks to anyone about creators' pre-work, about all that stuff, okay? You don't understand. Yeah, if you really think it's just this moment where it's wow, he's on and he's just creating content. Isn't that amazing? No, there's a shit ton of planning on this, okay? There's a ton of work. There's a lot of thoughtful things, and you have to think about, how do I care about bringing this in a thoughtful way to people. And it's cool that you do this format. And I'm sorry for railing on like I knew how it worked, but I definitely get the value of what it means to go into.
I appreciate it as you see all my checklists.
I just see your notes and everything just going in. It's like, hey, if it's going to go sideways, I got to go back to the Q&A and make sure that we're touching base on the things just to keep it flowing. And I fully appreciate the effects of what it means to be a good MC through watching my brother over the years, through watching him evolve and mix and just flow with crowds and groups and how he connects with them. It's an art. It's an art to be able to be that emotionally intelligent and to reflect that and make it look easy.
Yeah. Well, hey, we gotta have to wrap it up here.
I figured as much. Yeah.
Where can the people find more of you?
I am on Mixcloud. You can find me at mixcloud.com/DJ7DC. You can find me at soundcloud.com/DJ7DC. I try to update it to the new alias, but unfortunately it seems to break a lot of old players, so I'm just keeping it on that for now. But ultimately, if you know Linktree, it's Linktree/SevenDaysIn. That's actually the easiest way to get to all events, all things that are up to date, including all the old mixes and archives. I have tons of mixes online. Lots of stuff for drum and bass, lots of stuff for halftime, dubstep, anything out there. There's a whole smorgasbord of a lot of dope DJs that are connected via the profile that you can always research and explore. All of DC and DMB is literally at your fingertips in a big way out there. Oh, smaller thing, I also help administer the Facebook DC Drum and Bass group, or moderate it. Thankfully, with a couple other great homies who are out there. Avery James is also running that also in the background. He's just invited on more moderators too, but it's been a fun experience to kind of quietly just kind of see the scene grow, help push promotions, help get things out for the events and the people who are curious about it. It's been really fun to just quietly be in the background and still be a person who's kind of paying attention to the scene and kind of helping push it forward. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's been really fun sharing a lot of wild stories from back in the day. Probably spilled more tea than I should have, but it was still worth it to just go back and reminisce on some wild times. Thanks to all who are part of that. You're all amazing. And if you're still around, bless you and thank you.
All right. Well, keep smiling, everyone. Until next time. We'll catch you on the flip.
Peace.